In 2 weeks' time, public schools will reopen for the first time under the adjusted level 3 lockdown restrictions. Well, that's of course depending on the kind of changes that may be announced as the president addresses the nation tonight. It will be against the backdrop of a second wave of COVID-19 infections, which is significantly more intense than the first. More than 1,600 teachers have died after contracting the virus since the pandemic hit our shores. It's more than double the number of healthcare workers and police officers combined. So how exactly are teachers feeling about going back to school? We're joined by SATU General Secretary Mogoena Maluleke and NAPTOSA's Executive Director Basil Manuel. Good evening to both of you gentlemen, and thank you so much for your time. Mr. Maluleke, let me begin with you. The sentiment from SATU around the reopening of schools, and I suppose maybe just some of the concerns that you might have.
I don't hear. I think I have serious problem with my network, so I really apologize because I can't even get the question.
All right. So what we'll do is that we'll try and reconnect with Mr. Maluleke. Basil, let me bring you in here and perhaps begin with NAPTOSA's own views and reflections when it comes to, I suppose, gearing for the rest of the year and preparing to reopen schools. How are you feeling?
In fact, we're sitting on the horns of a dilemma. On the one hand, we have the large number of teachers that have been victims of the virus. We have a large number that are infected and affected by it. And of course, add to that the concerns, the worry, the stress that they are under just about the thought of returning to school. On the other hand, we have the learners. And those very teachers who are so worried are also worried that they don't want to lose out more teaching time because we've got a major catch-up that we have to do. We want a less disrupted year. We want to see that by the end of this year, we no longer have the backlog. So we've got to balance these two major issues with us. Where NAPTOSA is standing at the moment is we're saying we are preparing for the reopening of schools unless something dramatically happens that changes our mind. But there are certain conditions, and the conditions are about health and safety in all our schools and the readiness of all our schools.
Of course, one of the challenges for many teachers when it came to the previous reopening of schools was that there wasn't a standardized approach when it came to the measures that schools were taking in order to protect teachers and learners against contracting COVID-19. And it really seemed to all come down to the kind of resources that a school was able to pull together in order to procure some of your PPEs and sanitizers, whatever else is required. Do you foresee a different situation this time around?
I think there will still be a measure of that because we have schools that are much better resourced than others and they will do the extra things. However, there is the minimum that all schools should have, and those have to be supplied by the Department of Education or the provincial education departments. And that is why we are saying we need to see that every school is ready and has all these, because the protocols, and as the year went on, I think things started working a little better because we got into the flow of things and the regularity of supply and so on. But now we are back at the beginning and we want to see that in fact these things have been done. It's a great pity that we must start discussing them again because one would expect that every department knows that they should have these things on hand and ready. I may add that together with SATU, ourselves and the other unions will be conducting a survey later on in this week with our school principals to check on readiness, because we need to see that the country as a whole is ready for the beginning of the academic year, should it in fact still be on the 25th and 27th respectively.
SATU's General Secretary Mogoena Maluleke is back. Mogoena Maluleke is back with us on the line. Mr. Maluleke, perhaps the sentiment from teachers, because so many have lost their lives, and when we look at a place like Gauteng, we're hearing more and more of teachers who are pulling out of the marking process because they're so concerned about contracting COVID-19. Do you foresee that translating into teachers being unwilling to return back to the classroom?
Thank you and good evening to your viewers at home. And thank you for the question. Indeed, it's a very important question that needs to be understood in context. Is that the marking is a voluntary services, which we really appreciate very much as a union and as a country. We should appreciate the services that has been rendered by our teachers who volunteer to go and mark. And clearly, because Gauteng and the other provinces are what sports we see teachers withdrawing, we're not sure at this particular point in time whether that would translate into a situation where many of the teachers may say that they may not be able to go back to work come the 25th of January. We will be observing, of course, for the next 14 days in terms of the requirement by the WHO, because that is how you assess the safe return to school by the numbers that are declining. And if the numbers are not declining and the numbers are really increasing on a daily basis, you then have to go back to the drawing board and ensure that what Basil was saying, that all the tools and all the precautions are in place, and therefore you begin to adopt a flexible approach on whether you are going to have a 1 grade or 2 grades and so forth. This is a debate for the nation. This is a debate for everyone, and therefore we need to weigh in as the people of our country to ensure that our learners, our teachers, and our communities are safe. So I must say that we have not had the sentiment of the teachers saying that they will not be reporting on the 25th or the 27th.
Of course, the precautionary measures are just the beginning of what needs to be done. We're still dealing with an education system here in many ways that needs to catch up for some grades, and that could still be quite different as we enter the new year, because I doubt that all grades are necessarily going to be able to return to school at the same time. What impact has that had on teachers in the classroom? Mugwena, let me perhaps give you that question first, and Basil, I'll get your thoughts in a moment.
Well, you are right, but as we were closing 2020, there are the building blocks, which are basics that have not been completed, and therefore we have got what we call a recovery plan that basically has not been finalized, and we see the provinces are beginning to publish that, but we will then be engaging again, because that particular recovery plan takes into account the fact that there are areas that has got to be addressed, and then in addressing those particular areas, the school themselves have got to making sure that based on data and evidence that they have accumulated from themselves will then be addressing those issues. It is something else to have an imposition by the department rather than to have the schools themselves using their own professional judgment, their own unique situation to be able to say, for this particular grade, these are the areas that we have got to attend to. And for that particular grade, these are the areas that have got to be attended to. So it's important that the department understand that indeed 2021 was not going to be a normal year. 2022 is not going to be a normal year. We have said that we need to then plan in such a way that we are able to accommodate the uncertainties that are caused by this particular pandemic. And therefore, any recovery plan depends on the readiness of the school, the support that our schools are going to be getting from the Department of Education. And therefore, these are the areas that will be engaging robustly with the Department of Education in ensuring that those particular grades that will be the first to come back, what are the issues that are supposed to be there? Of course, we can't be talking about PPEs all the time. We need to be talking about what additional resources are there to ensure that we support the teachers in terms of psychosocial services, in terms of health issues that are imposed to us by the second wave and this particular variant that we don't know how to manage it.
Sure. Basil, let me briefly give you an opportunity to also weigh in there.
I want to just pick up on the psychosocial support. Remember, there are thousands of learners that are going to return to school and their teachers haven't come back with them. They've gone for good. And there are children who come back without their parents being around any longer. And we don't have the enough support and the manpower to deal with that. And that's one of the big issues. But what are the lessons from 2020? What have we learned? One of the things that stands out is that online lessons worked. But of course, the vast majority of our learners were cut out from that. So how have we managed to extend this? And I'm not saying give every child a tablet. We know that that's not possible in a short space of time. But how are we taking it deeper into the areas that didn't have the access? That is what we must learn. And Mugwena is so correct. We can't still be talking about PPEs when everybody knows that they must be in place. It, in fact, would be a miscarriage of justice if we find that any provincial department has failed to provide the necessary PPEs.
All right, that was Basil Manuel. He is NAPTOSA's Executive Director, and SATU's General Secretary Mugwena Maluleke.